ahead to the next scenario for the day. Now, in this case, you people already learned about functions, right? We have already covered functions. You people know how to make a function. We write the keyword function, we give it a name, and then we write the body, then we call it. Now, this scenario is asking you, what if we want to create a function with no name? No name means anonymous functions. What do you people think? Can we do that in JavaScript? Can we create a function without any name in JavaScript? Yes, okay, no. Yes and no. Yes, no. Okay. Let's understand the concept then. Guys, in JavaScript, functions can be created using three syntaxes. So far, you people have only learned the first syntax, which we call as function declaration syntax. And what is that syntax saying? That you will put the keyword function, then you have to give it some name, and then you will put some parameters, say here, if it is required. Then you will have the body. Body can have the statements inside, can have a return statement inside. And then if you would like to call this function, you will use the function name. And what would happen in that case? You will pass some arguments if needed, right? This is what we all have learned about functions so far. So this is just one way of creating functions in JavaScript. That is what we call as function declaration syntax, right? This is just one way of creating functions in JavaScript called as function declaration syntax, where you people will have to write the keyword function. You will have to give it a name, and then to call the function, you will have to use its name, right? Now let's talk about the other syntaxes we have. Now JavaScript provides us a provision to create functions without name. How, ma'am? If you're going to create that up without any name, that means it must have looked something like this. Function, no name has to be given up. Let's say the parameter will be given up, say a comma b. And let's say this function has to print sum of a and b. So we can simply say a plus b. But ma'am, you created this function without its name. You created this function without its name. But now, how can we call it? To call a function, we need a name. So what are we going to do now? This entire function, we are going to store inside a variable. Inside a variable. So we will assign this function as a value to a variable. So let's just create a variable called result. And now result holds this function inside. Now, if you want to call this function up, you will have to use the variable name. And how we will write that up? See, result, that's the variable holding the function inside. And that is having a function. So to invoke that function, you will pass arguments now to this. And you can see the output first. It returns the perfect sum. 2 plus 3 is 5. This syntax is what we call as function expression syntax. Function expression syntax, where you will write the keyword function, but no name will be given. No name to this function will be given. And we will rather store this function inside a variable. To call this up, we will use the variable name and pass arguments directly there. This is the second syntax we have in JavaScript to create the functions. But then we thought of, can we create a function without name? Yes, ma'am, we already did that. But can we create it even without writing this keyword function? So that means now we wanted something that I'm creating a function, but I don't want to write the keyword function and I don't want to give it a name. How is that possible? So JavaScript recently in the ES6 version introduced this third syntax called arrow functions, or let's just call it as arrow syntax, right? Arrow function syntax. Now, first, let's just understand. I'll be talking arrow functions in deep, but first, let's understand the basic difference across all three. In the first declaration syntax, you people were writing the keyword, you were giving it a name. In the second syntax, we were writing the keyword, but we were not giving it any name. In this arrow function, we are saying, don't write the function, don't give it a name. That means you will directly write the parameters, say x5. I have two parameters to give. Let's say I'll call them as x and y. Now it says, because you are not writing any function keyword, you are not writing any name, put here one fat arrow. How do you write that arrow is just your equals to with the greater than symbol here. Right? And then it says, now write the body, whatever you want to do, whatever you want it to do, right? Console.log of say x plus y. But ma'am, now how are we going to call this function? How are we going to call? It does not have the keyword. It is not even having a name. So it says again, this entire function has to be stored in some variable. Say again, I create a variable called result. Result holds this inside. Now, all I'll do is I'll use the variable name and pass here two values, 9 and 8. So it should return me the sum of them, which is 70. So first, let's understand the basic difference between three syntaxes, and then we will talk about arrow functions in detail. What is the difference across all three syntaxes is, in declaration, you people have to write the keyword function. You have to give it a name. In expression syntax, we do not give it a name. We just write the keyword function and store this inside some variable. In the case of arrow functions, we don't write the keyword function. We don't give it a name, and we still store it inside the variable. Is the difference across the syntaxes clear to everyone? Any doubts related to syntax? Drop them up. I'll answer them. Deeper level of understanding we will have now, once you people are clear with syntaxes. Okay, so far I can see everyone is clear. Okay. Shubham, as I said, I'll be coming for that part, right? I'll come to that portion. If the syntax difference is clear, now think about it. Why have we introduced this sort of syntax in the updated version or in the recent version of JavaScript? What was the need, right? Obviously, if we have introduced this in the EA6 version, it must be offering certain advantages over the traditional approach. So let's now talk about the concept of arrow functions. When are we going to work with it? Why do we work with arrow functions? Why arrow functions introduced? What are the advantages it offers to us, right? And we are going to understand it with practical demonstration here. So first of all, let's just put the heading as advantages of arrow functions, right? Let's say you people don't know what arrow functions are. So I give you an assignment that you people have to write one function which will simply say multiply two numbers, right? You people have to write a function to multiply two numbers. So how would you create that function? You will do function, you will give it a name, and then you people will put some parameter, say AB, and then you will have your console statement over here, console.log of, or let's just work with return then. Return A into B. That's what you will do. And when you want to call this up, you will use the name you gave, multiply, and you will pass two values, say 5 into 6. So output we expect is 30. Yes, everyone is going to do that. Let me put this up under console. Right? Because we don't know, ma'am, arrow functions, we too are going to write the function in this way. Now let me show you how we can do the same thing in a single line with the help of arrow functions. So now let's say I don't want to work with the traditional approach. I'll go and work with your arrow functions. So arrow functions, we have to store it in some variable. I'll create here a variable, say product. Now we learn arrow function says no need to write the keyword function. No need to give it any name. So ma'am, directly parameters should be given. Let's call the parameters as R and S, right? R and S. Now we have to put an arrow, and now we have to return their product. We have to return their product. See what I'm going to write here. I'll simply say R multiplied by S. And now I have to call it. So I'll simply call it over here. And I'm saying print this. We will pass some values here, say 6 and 2. So now I want you to see the output first. It prints the right output. 6 into 2 should be 12. 12 is the right output coming up. Now think about it. Would you prefer writing 3 lines of code, or would you prefer a single line of code if both of them are doing the same job? Which approach is preferable then? Writing a single line of code or 3 lines of code? That's the first advantage of your arrow functions. That arrow functions provides us a shorter syntax to write functions. Arrow functions provides us a simple and a shorter syntax than the traditional methods. But ma'am, how come you are writing this? Explain. Guys, now there are two things you need to understand how we are writing and doing the same thing in a single line. First, have you people noticed that I have not used any curly brackets here? Have you noticed this? I have not used any curly brackets, right? That is the first advantage that that's the next advantage arrow functions offers, that if you are writing a single line of code, then you can skip writing the curly brackets, right? If you are writing, Nitin, I'm going to cover that up. Guys, just hold on. Let me cover my part first. Then I'll take up the queries, right? If we are writing a single line of code, we can skip writing the curly brackets. But ma'am, then you should have written here the return keyword. See, you directly wrote R into S. Yes, that's the next advantage we have, that if you are writing a single line of code and that single line of code is a return statement, you don't have to write the return keyword. You can skip writing the return keyword. Why? Because that is implicit in arrow functions. Arrow functions automatically would return you the value. So if you are writing a single line of code and that single line statement itself is a return statement, then again, you don't have to write it. That is something arrow functions implicitly would do, right? Now, here, two things we covered. For single line of code, we don't have to use the curly brackets. For single line of code, if it's a return statement, we don't have to write the return keyword. But ma'am, what if return though is an optional statement? What if we are not having a return statement? What if we are having a console statement? Then you can simply write it up. Pay attention over here, guys. Let's just have over here the same function, let product. This time we don't want its value to be returned, right? We simply want it to be printed on the screen. So I can simply say console.log of A plus B. Single line, so we are skipping the curly brackets, and now we can call directly this function up, that is product. We can pass here 8 and 7. Since it's summing them up, output should be 15, that is getting returned to us, right? Okay, we have messages. Now I'll read about it. So I was not on the chat box. In that case, it will give only single value, but in declaration, we can have multiple values. You can pass multiple values, Shreyansh. We can have any sort of values, any number of parameters you can have, any number of arguments you can have. The concept is still same here as well. So return is implicit, right? Return always returns you a single value after calculation, be it a traditional approach of function declaration or be it your arrow. Return always returns a single value only. That doesn't change. Return concept still remains the same. Akira, so arrow functions are concise, precise, yes, and provides a shorter syntax. We'll have multiple examples to understand that. What if we want to create function to print series? So we can write that logic here. Logic is what you are writing here. I'll take another example and maybe that will clear us. Shreyansh, allow me 2 more minutes. First part, is this part clear to all of us? That advantage of arrow function is it provides us a shorter syntax than the traditional approaches, right? No, Bhargav, I haven't explained sorting so far. It would be in your upcoming session, in 9th session. Okay. Now, in that case, what we have understood is that it provides us a shorter syntax. Second, that if we are writing a single line of code, we can skip curly bracket. If you are writing a single line of code and that too itself is a return statement, you can skip writing the return keyword. But does that mean, ma'am, that curly brackets are not supported in arrow functions? No. Curly brackets are supported, but in case of multi-lines of code, right? I'll just put them up over here. Curly brackets are supported when in multi-line of codes. Now pay attention. Now see, Shreyansh, like when we say multiple lines of code, obviously not every time you are going to create a function to sum things up or to multiply, right? Maybe tomorrow you will have a function to print a sequence of Fibonacci number, to check if a number is a leap year or not. Maybe tomorrow you would like to calculate the average of 5 numbers. Maybe you would like to calculate the percentage of a particular student. So you will have multiple inputs plus you will have multiple lines of code. So logic is clearly going to be more there. In that cases, we will have curly brackets and logic will remain as it is as that of your function declaration part. Pay attention to this part, guys. Let's say I have to calculate the percentage now. How can I do that? We will require a variable to hold in case of arrow. Now let's say we will have student marks over here for subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, subject 4, let's say subject 5, right? Now after that we put the fat arrow. Now I'm not having a single line of code. So you will have your logic enclosed in a pair of curly brackets now. Now write the function as it is. Let's say you will have a variable, ma'am. Let percent equals, how do we calculate the percentage? We have to sum the marks of all the subjects, sub 1, sub 2, sub 3, sub 4, sub 5. That needs to be divided by the total and this entire has to be multiplied by 100. That is how we calculate it. Now let's say I have to return it up. So I will now write return percent, right? So similar to that, Shreyansh, if let's say you have some logic to print Fibonacci, you will write that logic in the pair of curly bracket. Ma'am, why are you writing return now? Because it's not a single line of code. Now you're writing multiple lines. You will have to explicitly mention wherever you need to return a value. Now, when I have to call this function up, I'll use the variable name and I'll pass here values, let's say 97, 98, 99, 96, 95. This is how the function has to be. So curly brackets are supported in arrow functions, but only in the cases where you will have multiple lines of code to write. Does that make sense to everyone? We can have the output over here. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. Okay, then I have one more point to cover here. In regards to arrow functions, let me come up over here. Arrow functions also provides us a way to skip your round brackets. Can you people tell me where are we using round brackets in arrow functions? Where I am using the round brackets in arrow functions? In case of arrow functions, to define the parameters, right? To define the parameters and obviously to pass arguments. Now, this arrow function also has a provision wherein I can skip writing those round brackets. But when under which condition? Pay attention. If you are creating a function, tomorrow you can create a function to say welcome, hello world. They does not need any input, right? So in such cases, how you people are going to create your arrow function? You will put empty round brackets, fat arrow, and let's just simply say console.log of welcome, right? Whatever you would like to show. So this round bracket has to be empty when there are no parameters. Empty round bracket needs to be added. That's mandatory, right? We have to put empty round brackets to indicate that this function does not need any argument to work. Then if I'm having more than one parameter, ma'am, we have seen we need to separate them with comma, right? We need to separate them with comma. Whatever number of arguments values you have, you simply have to separate them with comma. That is how you people are going to create your function over there, right? So that means in case if you are having two or more parameters, you need to have comma separated values, right? Now, arrow function says if you have exactly one parameter to pass, let's say I want to say hello along with the name. Let's say hello, Trio, hello, Shubham, hello, any person of your batch, right? So we want to concatenate two things, a hello default message with the every time username. So how can we do that? It will require one input. It says if you have exact one parameter, you can skip writing the round brackets. You can directly put the parameter, fat arrow, and then whatever you would like to do from that text. So let's say I simply want to have this hello concatenated with A, right? So in that case, I can skip writing your round brackets. So in case of exact one parameter, we can skip your round brackets. Now, why this is important to know and remember? Because sometimes in your MCQs, you will see they will ask you to pick the invalid syntax of arrow function, and they will surely have this case. And you will immediately mark this as invalid because, ma'am, they forgot to put the round brackets. No, it is allowed in case of exactly one parameter. So we need to remember this case as well, that arrow functions provides us a provision to skip writing these round brackets for exactly one parameter. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone. Okay, so what we have learned about arrow functions, that they have shorter syntaxes than the regular functions. They have implicit return statement. They increases the readability of the code because it's a single line, right, that we are writing. And single line of code, because you are writing just a single line of code, chances of error, room for error also decreases. Right now, one of you are having this question, ma'am, when are we going to work? Like, why we are going to have arrow functions to utilize somewhere? So in the upcoming session, guys, you people are going to learn about callbacks, right? So the traditional functions that we have learned, those are best for object methods. However, these arrow functions are heavily used in callbacks, right? So in session number 8th and 9th, we are going to talk about callback functions and applications. There you will understand how arrow functions are utilized in programming, right? Just remember the use case for now, and we will see them practically in our upcoming sessions. Now, let's just come back here and walk you through with the points. So first of all, we were having function declaration, which holds the keyword and a name. Then we came up with an idea to not have a name. So instead of a name, we just wrote the keyword, and to call it, we assign it to a variable. That became the function expression syntax. Then we came up with the idea to not even write that function keyword. So we removed that function keyword, just kept the parameters with the body, and added an arrow in between to make it an arrow syntax over there. Now, what are arrow functions in JavaScript? They provide us a simple and concise syntax for creating functions, and they are better than your traditional approaches. This is how we create your arrow functions. You will directly put the parameters by an arrow, followed by an arrow. We also call it as fat arrow, right? That's completely okay if you call it an arrow. Then you will have the body. If it is a single line of code, we can skip writing curly brackets. If you have multiple lines of code, you will have to write the curly brackets. We have certain use cases that if you are not having any parameter to pass, you are going to keep empty round brackets. Same is the case for arguments, right? We don't have to pass anything. If you have only one, then you can skip writing the round brackets here, but then you will have to pass it in the parenthesis itself. So calling part is not going to skip, only the writing part or defining parameter part will skip. Now functions, arrow functions have implicit return keyword for a single line of code. right? If in case you are having a block of code, enclosed multiple lines of code, you will explicitly mention that up. Now, I want you people to try this activity to be confident of arrow functions. You have to do it on your Replit, guys. Please understand what's the ask here. It says create an arrow function which will take two arguments and return true if both the numbers are even. So if I call your function and give inputs 2, 4, output should be true because both the numbers are even. If I give 2, 5, output should be false because one of them is false. Now you people already know how to check for even and odd. Number when divided by 2 leaves remainder 0. We call it as your even number. Start creating this function. Once done, drop a done for me to see. Arrow functions which will have two arguments needs to return true if both of them are even. You people will have to do it using arrow functions. Once done, drop a done. Good job done, Shubham. Good job done, Bhargav. Yes. Good job done, Ritu. Good job done, Nitin, Akhila, Sudhir. Very good. Let's wait for another minute for others to complete this. Good job done, Nima. Okay, let's say I don't know arrow functions. So how would I do it in traditional approach? I'll put the keyword, I'll give it a name. And now, ma'am, I have a condition to check. So I'll use conditionals. If A mod 2 is equals to 0 and B mod 2 is equals to 0, then I have to say return true. Correct? That's what you want to do. Or otherwise, what we will do is we will simply say return false. Guys, this is what your people would have done in the traditional approach. Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes, right? How many lines of code do we have to write? 7 lines of code. Now we are saying no need to do that, right? No need to do that. Why? Because we have a shorter syntax available. Let's say we will name it as even, the variable. Now arrow function says no need to write the keyword function, no need to give it a name, directly write the parameters. So let's just put the parameters as A and B. After the arrow, what I have to write is A mod 2 equals to 0 and B mod 2 equals to 0. That's all. That's all. Now see, rather than writing 7 lines of code, I'm just writing here 2 lines of code and still this would work well. I'm giving input 4, 6 and it returns me true. If I'm going to change this output to value one of them being an odd number, say 4, 5, output it returns me false. So this function works well. Now, why are we writing this single line? Why are we not putting any if else here? Because we learned and operator by default returns us a Boolean value. So we are just providing it an expression to evaluate. and return the outcome we get. So it is going to implicitly return a Boolean value to us, and that's what we are utilizing here. So rather than writing 7 lines of code, I can just write this 1 line of code to do the same task. Is everyone clear why arrow functions are best now? Okay. Then in that case, just to summarize what all the things we have learned, I'll quickly go through with the syntaxes once again. You all learned function declaration needs a keyword and a name. Now let's say I have to create the same square function using expressions. So expression ma'ams, they will have the variable to hold it, and we will write the keyword function, but no name will be given. And it will have one input, say number. We will have curly brackets and we will simply say return number into number. That's the expression syntax we have, wherein you write the keyword and store the function in a variable here. Then comes the third one, that is your arrow function. It says it will also be storing the function in a variable, but no need to write the keyword, no need to give it any name. Directly write your parameter, but that is a single parameter, so we can actually skip writing the round brackets. We can directly write the parameter name followed by your arrow, and we have a single line of code, so no need to write the curly bracket. That single line of code itself is a return statement, so no need to write that up as well. You can actually see the same thing, the same exact output we are now going to have with all the 3 approaches. And which one is shorter in our case? Have a look. All of us are returning the square of the number 4 with the 16, 16, 16. But this provides us the simplest syntax to work with. So that's the advantage arrow functions are now bringing up in JavaScript. Is everyone clear with all the 3 syntaxes, guys? Great. This is something we just now covered.